Good morning and welcome to Raise the Bar. This is the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. My name is Troy Haynes. I'm your host. And today I'm going to be talking with a young man who's a local product here in the Southland, Dylan Fox. He's from Irvine High School, and he is the new meet record holder, school record holder, and all around butt-kicking long jumper. And we're just going to get him right in. He just walked into our waiting room. He's ready to go. So, Dylan, how you doing this morning?
I'm pretty good. A little tired from yesterday, but I'm doing well. How about you?
I am doing well, man. Yeah, it's that time of year, right? All the big meets are here. So, I was just telling our listeners that I just bumped into Dylan earlier this year at the Concordia meet that I was at, and you were in the process of shattering all the records there that I remember. Your first jump was I think was above the allowable wind, but then you came back and beat it with good wind a couple different times.
Yep.
And that just kind of started the roller coaster. So I introduced myself and asked about you, found out you were from Irvine High School, which was of great interest to me because I used to coach there with Coach Brenton and Coach Gary Gross. So I did 4 years there, had a great time with those guys there. Gary Gross is a big Bruin fan like me. So we would always talk, football and basketball and everything else. And, great times over there, great kids. And then, so you went from Irvine High School and stayed a local product because Concordia is pretty close to Irvine, right?
Yeah. I mean, Concordia, I got in when I was a freshman, but I ended up going to Concordia University in Aliso, Idaho. And I played soccer and ran track there. So I was able to do both sports that I like to do. And then I decided that the education wasn't for me, and I looked at Concordia and they'd see me jump. And so it was a pretty easy transfer from there.
Okay. So they weren't even interested in you in track and field at Concordia when you were a freshman?
It's more like my sister actually works here right now, and she worked here then. She was like, "Oh, you should just apply." Like, I didn't know anything about Concordia, so I didn't end up going.
Right.
But figured some things out the next year, and I met Coach Woods, and they kind of poured into me, and it worked out in the end.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I also know a small track and field world that we live in. I know your coach, Lauren Magneson. I forget how I bumped into Lauren. It was last year. I think it had something to do with Instagram. And then we actually did a podcast because I've been looking for, basically, I'm sure the listeners are getting tired of hearing about the old coach's dreams. I was, in college wanted to do nothing but go to the Olympics, go to the trials, and start that whole process. And, probably starting my sophomore year. And I chased that dream to the fullest. I waited till I was 28 years old before I finally retired and said, I don't think I can make it. And, but I've always just loved watching the Olympics. I love watching the trials. I love watching the drama, everything else. And so on the podcast, I tend to try to get either someone who's been to the trials or made a team, or, the scales have kept going up. So we got Doug Nordquist in here for the second podcast. And of course he jumped in 84. He made the team and finished fifth in the finals, as a matter of fact, in the high jump. And, and then coached, had a long career, jumped 236, which is like 7.875 on a cadaver reconstructed left knee, by the way. And then he's been coaching forever and a day. I've jumped against him, coached against him, played golf with him, and he's a great guy. So anyway, went from him, got Leo Williams, who was an alternate on that team. And so the theme has kind of been, hey, trials, games. We've had a couple of Olympic medalists on here, especially Kevin Young a few back. So the reason I bring that up, Dylan, is that I think all of a sudden you are just kind of bursting onto the scene here. These marks are getting farther and farther. Have you started thinking about dreams like that, getting to the U.S. Olympic trials and going on to the Olympics? Is that something that's on your radar?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been something that's in the back of my mind. I started in high school. running track because I wanted to stay in shape for soccer. So soccer has always been my main sport growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to college and I was able to play both sports. And now that I'm finally focusing on just track, it's a whole different ball game because you're not going back and forth and your body doesn't have to change. And so now that I'm producing these marks, it is actually something that I'm looking forward to. And I think Coach Magneson has actually told me, she says that all these guys, all the long jumpers are peaking or jumping their best when they're in their mid to late 20s. And so I'm like, shoot, I got a couple years left to see what I can do. And I'm
Right.
only 20 right now, and I'm a sophomore in college. And so I have 2 years here, and then who knows what goes on after that. So it's definitely something that's been in the back of my mind that I want to see what I can do in the future.
Oh yeah. Well, tell you what, it's so funny. It's brings up a concept that I call stretch with athletes. And I think when you're in your early 20s, I think there's just an amazing capacity for stretch. And by that I mean growth in all areas, flexibility, strength, range of motion, power. I remember in high school, I think I squatted like 220 and I think I benched more than I squatted when I was high jumping. And then, I got to the weight room at UCLA. There was some really large people in there. And I remember walking around going, man, I gotta start doing something here. And, but I don't think I was really capable of that in high school, really. I don't know. I hadn't grown into my man body yet or something, but those first 2 years in college, I went from 6'3", 180 to 6'3", 195 kind of effortlessly. And it was actually a little heavy, I thought, for jumping. Del Davis and Lee Balkin used to say, oh, you're too heavy, And I used to go, man, everybody always told me I was skinny in high school. What are you talking about? And then, along with that 195 body weight, I got my squats up to 400. My vertical, 2-footed vertical was always amazing, and I remember it just got better and better and better. And it was like, and then you would just push more, you're like, man, this is working, and you lift more and you run more and you do this, and you're doing things that you just couldn't envision even 2 years before. I remember thinking after 2 years in the college weight room, I'm like, man, I wish I'd have had this body when I was playing high school football, because I might have been somebody, because like your soccer was your first love, mine was football. And
Yep.
I was way better as an athlete after 2 years in college than I ever was in high school. So
Mm-hmm.
how has that been? Let's chart your marks a little bit. What was your best long jump in high school?
So my best long jump in high school was 7.15 meters, and I jumped that at the Olympic Training Center. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was just a matter of the competition because I was jumping against guys. I was 18 then, and I was jumping against guys who were 23, 25, some guys
Mm-hmm.
27, some guys were trying to go for the Olympic trials. So I was like, well,
Yeah.
show up today. And I think it's kind of those situations that push me to go further.
Right.
And up until this point this year, I hadn't PR'd since then. So that was junior year, in between junior year and senior year of high school. And
Right.
unfortunately, I don't have the record at my high school because I jumped the mark outside of it
Right. Right.
for USATF. So, that's going to stay with me. But until this year, I hadn't jumped further than that. And, our first track meet, indoor wasn't doing so great. There were a couple of injuries that I was dealing with. And I just wasn't putting it together, but something clicked at that meet that you went to. And
Mm-hmm.
the home meet, I was jumping over 7 meters pretty easily. And before that, it felt like it was pretty tough to get over 7.
Right. Right.
And I think all my jumps that day were over 7 meters. And I ended up breaking the school record at 7:22, I think was that
Right.
day.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks later, went to UCI, and there was good competition there. And I ended up winning that by 1 centimeter, going 7:35. And I don't think I had a mark below 7:10. So it's just kind of like a progression,
Right.
going a little bit further every single time. Then I got sick for 2 weeks, so I couldn't make it to Brian Clay.
Real.
And, stomach issues. And then right once I got off that, I got sick again. So just tough past 2 weeks. And then this week leading up to PacWest Championships, just did what I could to get better. And, I think the rest helped me a little bit, but it
Mm-hmm.
was a really, really good competition on Friday. And everyone was jumping like crazy. I was seated third going into it because we had some guy who jumped 785 this year.
Wow.
And yeah, everyone was jumping like crazy. My first jump, was 7:23. Wasn't great. It wasn't horrible, wasn't great, but it definitely wasn't going to put me on the podium. And then some guy came out and jumped 7:41, 7:52. And I was like, shoot, I have
Yeah.
to pop one right now. And so on my fourth jump in finals, I jumped 7:49. And so that broke the school record and placed me in second for the meet. And then my fifth jump was a good jump. It was 7:46, but it didn't increase in anything. And then finally on my last jump, the whole crowd was going. I got a clap going and it just kind of hyped me up. And then I ended up jumping 7:55, which won the competition for Pac West, beat the meet record by 1 centimeter, school record. And now I'm ranked 10th in the nation, so I should be going to Pueblo unless unless 6 people jump better than 7:55.
Right. Yeah. That's a kind of a weird rule, but things have changed since I was at your level. I remember it used to just be a standard. Standard when I was a senior at UCLA in '86 was 222 in the high jump. Since then, they've actually brought it down, and they go through all the regionals and all that other stuff. And the 16, like you said, the top 16. So yeah, if you're sitting 10th right now, that's got to be going to be pretty good. How long do you have to sweat that out? What's the amount of time for somebody to beat that in the next week or the next what?
There should only be one meet left for most schools across the country. Usually they have a last chance meet.
Last chance meet, yeah.
Yeah. Ours is at Azusa again, and that's on the 14th and the 15th. So after that weekend, we'll have to see how I'm looking. But they're debating whether or not to have me jump at Azusa or have me rest.
Yeah. I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, do you go there and like just try to protect, or do you just sweat it out? Yeah, that's a tough one. So you mentioned something that I keep thinking about. I was a typical jumper, high jumper. Number one, high jumpers would jump every day if they could, because we just like it so much. I don't know what it is. It's almost like an addiction. But then our shins rebel, right? So at a certain point in the season, all of a sudden it's like you're jumping on hamburger, your legs feel crappy, and you're like, man, I just got to take a rest. Mm-hmm. I was forced into rest 2 different times in my career, and they were both beneficial. My senior year, I got a twinge in my hamstring right at league finals, and my coach shut me down for the next week. And I was feeling kind of tired. I was getting to the end of the season and just in time for the league finals run and all that. So I made it to league finals, but then it was CIF prelims, and he didn't let me do anything. I jogged and stretched and maybe did some backovers, and then CIF prelims came up. I jumped 6'7" first jump and was in. It was like easy. And I started learning a little bit about recovery, like what it was like to actually take a couple, days off or a week off. And it's a really interesting thing. When I was forced to, in that case, it all worked out pretty well. I've told this story on here before, taking, tons of aspirin and waking up, spitting up blood in the morning from taking too much aspirin and stuff like that. So how did I was curious, have you felt that kind of drag before from overtraining? And like you said, you mentioned that you said you thought it might have been beneficial that you got sick and took those 2 weeks off. So how do we figure this out without having to get sick or injured,
Yeah, seriously. I think it's different for everybody, because we have some people on our team who perform way better when they kind of killed their body in the first couple of days of the week and then they have a couple of days to rest. But for me, I think I've realized it growing up as well, but never really kind of brought it to mind, was that my body just needs more time to recover, I think, than other people's. Mm-hmm. So having those 2 weeks off, obviously I was sick, so it wasn't complete recovery, complete rest. But it definitely did help. And I have noticed in the past, when I take a little bit of time off, I always come back stronger. Mm-hmm. So I think it's about finding a fine line of training and pushing your body and, growing and, working on technique, working on strength, but also making sure that you have time to rest before competitions and not overdoing it, because I think it's very easy to overdo it when you just want to keep going and keep pushing. That's what my coach was talking to me about. She said the past 2 weeks, she admitted, she's like, dude, I know it was so hard for you to not be training. And it really was, because I always want to be out there, pushing myself and getting faster, jumping higher.
Right.
But sometimes pulling back is better than pushing even further.
Yeah, it's weird. I need to coin this term before somebody else does, but I call it, the training edge that we're talking about, that
Mhm.
everybody wants to be sharp, so I would think razor sharp, right? We want to be efficient. We want to be, completely at the peak of our technique game. We want to be maxed out physically. We're as fast and as flexible and as everything, just everything's on point, right? And
Mhm.
I think it's so hard to get to there and maintain that, from day to day, week to week, as you're getting through a competition season. And like you said, it's human nature to feel like, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Am I maintaining that? Should I be doing something else
Mhm.
as well? Like we've talked about a lot of things on this podcast, from sports psychology, and I'm actually later today could be doing another podcast with a gal from Hawaii,
Mhm.
Monteleone, who's nutrition stuff, and Barbara, who helps me with all my stuff. But Chaka, the number one jumper in Canada right now, she's into nutrition. So there's all these, there's training. We talked to training gurus in here. We've talked to other athletes and coaches. What do you like to do? And what I've found in my own past was that drive towards overdoing it. And, to me, it's like somebody taking a razor out now that they know is sharp, right? But in the back of your mind, you're like, is it still sharp? Is it still sharp?
Yeah.
Shave with it. It better be sharp, or it won't work. I gotta
Yep.
keep it sharp. And it's like, if you keep using it, it turns into razor dull, really quickly. It's like everybody knows you got a nice sharp razor and you keep using it, and all of a sudden it doesn't work the same, and it's like, I think so many times, I've been guilty of the razor dull thing. And I think I probably err a little bit on the other side now with my jumpers, towards the razor sharp and the under training as opposed to over. But it's
Mhm.
such a fine line. I'll be sitting there thinking, well, I'm not going to really do that much with this kid today. And I'll have them doing, what I call a zero step, where they're just standing right on their takeoff leg, right next to the bar. And we jump in. I go, well, see,
Yep.
they're not running and they're not really shoving that leg against the ground. So we do some zeros, we do some one steps, then we end up doing some three steps and some five steps. And I'll look back afterwards and I'm looking at like 25 videos. I'm like, dude, you just gave them 25 jumps, and you're trying to save the leg, So it's tough, really tough. So with you being number 10 in the nation now at the collegiate level, there's also, of course, some
Mhm.
guys that are no longer in the collegiate level that happen to be very good athletes that are still hanging around for the Olympics. So you've got to go through those guys as well. So you're getting ready to go to nationals, but then there's also the Olympic trials. Have you gotten a trial mark yet, or is that something that's still out there?
I haven't honestly looked at all at that. I would assume that the trial mark is farther. I think a couple of years ago it was at 8 meters,
Mm-hmm.
to even be considered. So I'd have to go just a little bit further.
Right, right.
But yeah, that's not really on my radar right now.
That's interesting. Yeah, I know there's the A standard and the B standard, right? And then there's that's the game has changed in the last few years. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it was the dying off of the old stars, not dying off, but no longer being around, getting too old. So funny when we get old enough where we disappear from the scene. It really is like dying in a way, right? You're like, okay, I can't do this anymore. That's something we haven't talked about much on the podcast, is, when the career ends and then, do you become a coach, or get a real job, or what after that? So take us back to, I wanted to see what was the thing that I noticed about you, Dylan, when I saw you. Was I remember hearing Gary rant about you. It was a few years back, and I got this one kid, he's jumping out of the building. I'm like, okay, cool. And, that was the last I remember of it, because I'm, usually more paying attention to high jump and not as much to the long jump. So, I apologize if I missed you. But then, here I see you at this meet and I'm like, oh, wow, this is that kid from Irvine. And you look like a football player. Like, you are pretty jacked. You're standing there on the runway and this kid's just wide shoulders and narrow hips and, guns and everything. And I'm just like, man, I don't know that did this happen in the last couple of years or what? Like I didn't picture you like that from high school or something, but man, you look like, you could be playing wide receiver or slot or something. So I heard the soccer angle. I'm like, I'm not used to seeing soccer players look that bad either. So
No,
that been like at the college level there. Talk about getting trained by Lauren now and your jumping and your lifting and all that.
I mean, in high school, I don't think I ever lifted, maybe a little bit freshman year from the soccer
Mm-hmm.
team, and maybe a little bit senior year. But other than that, I never really lifted. I never lifted with a coach. And we did very limited lifts at Soka University my freshman year. And so now that I'm here, I think a lot of it is genetics, but I am actually lifting now. And so it's a whole different game. And I still don't think that I'm lifting optimally for long jump. I think it's a lot of well-rounded lifts. Like we're trying to keep our whole body in shape, but there's nothing that I'm focusing on that's really long jump specific.
Mm-hmm.
And me and Coach Mags are starting to work on that. And we started to implement a few things towards the end of the season. But I think dialing it down in the weight room is going to really, really help with my knee strength and my ankle strength and,
Right.
making sure that I can get through that takeoff without collapsing.
Mm-hmm. Mm. That's a
A
huge
lot
thing.
of where my jump,
Go ahead.
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
seriously. Uh, yeah, I was gonna say like my stomach is sore right now because of jumping on Friday. Like it's the weirdest thing, but everything is affected when you go and crash into that board.
Mm-hmm.
And my biggest strength when I'm jumping is probably my speed and taking my speed through the board. I don't think I have a crazy amount of hop, but I can definitely transition my speed,
Into
through the board and into the pit.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think working specifically on weightlifting with takeoff and knee strength is going to really, really help me next year. And,
Yeah.
I'm excited to see where that's going to take me because I think I'm still scratching the surface of that.
Right, right. Well, that it sounds like it's all pretty new to you, which is cool. That means
Yeah.
there's a lot of stretch there. That term I was mentioning earlier, I think about that sometimes. You said you're only 20, right? So that's crazy. So when we're talking about specific now, this is bringing up a principle we've talked about a few times here too. If you're tuning in at the halfway point, which like who would be, but we're going to pretend this is sports radio. You're listening to Raise the Bar with Troy Haynes, and I'm talking with Dylan Fox, who's a sophomore now at Concordia University at a local college here in Irvine. And is that Irvine or Laguna Niguel? Where is it technically?
That's in Irvine.
Still
Yeah.
in Irvine, yeah, it's pretty close by.
Yeah.
So, and we're talking
Near
about,
UCI.
yeah, okay. From what we're talking about with training and it brings up a principle called sports specificity, and I heard you mention that again. You're bringing up a lot of great terms. There's lifting, and we could point to bodybuilders, right? There's people, and I think a lot of times when people hear lifting, most people would think, oh, bodybuilders, you're building up your body for whatever, just posing. Not really, right? When we're doing what we're doing for track and field or for football or for soccer or whatever sport you're training for, you're really training to improve something, a weakness in, like you're saying, joint stability or, power output or speed or explosive, plyometrics for getting some lift off the ground. And so you go from a real general base, right? And then if you picture a pyramid going up, you're tapering and you're getting, my concept both in reps and sets and weights and volume is everything, that the base is wide, big numbers, right, of reps and all that, and it tapers up towards the top. And you can do the same thing with speed. You can do the same thing with your plyos. You can do the same thing with just your lifting in general, right? And so we get into that. Now, what I'm curious about for you as a long jumper, when you're talking about specificity now, because for a long time I've told people, you see everybody doing squats. I'm like, squats are great. I love squats. When I got up to 400 pounds in the back squat, the next year I went from 6'8" my first year at UCLA to 7'2". I mean, it made a tremendous difference in power and lift. And at the same time,
Yeah.
I don't jump off two legs, right? So it's not a super sport specific event, but it does translate to how I performed. And now I've been using, two-legged squats as like a base. And then as we get going through, I start shifting to one-legged support stuff. So what are the lifts that you're talking about now that you do to enhance either your takeoff, or you mentioned your speed was one of your top assets. So how does that work? I'm just curious as to how you're training in the weight room to get either both your speed or your lift.
I mean, the funny thing is, most of what we do are circuits, and we actually haven't done we haven't done full squats since probably earlier in the year or late last year.
Right.
We've been doing more shorter explosive things like, quarter squats or half squats, and not going all the way down, just not maxing out the range of motion and trying to be explosive through that upper portion.
Right.
Something long jump specific that we're doing is hang cleans onto a box. And so we're having to drive that knee up, drive our arms up, and then, plant our foot on that box. So we're making sure, we train both for me, it'll be my left leg, my takeoff leg, pushing that bar up, but also my right leg to get it up as quick as possible. And other than that, we haven't done too much more in the weight room specific to long jump. And other than that, it really has just been general body strengthening things. And next year, I'm gonna be working with Coach Mags on more long jump specific stuff, because we really haven't done much in the sphere of plow tricks or long jump specific lifts. And I think that's a whole nother sphere that I can tap into that I haven't even yet. And so, yeah, I'll definitely see where that takes me. But other than that hang clean box step up, hasn't been too much that we've done other than general strengthening.
I like that. I've seen a bunch of those. Again, if you've been listening to the podcast at all, I don't live on Instagram, but I really kind of do. As I check in, the stuff that comes across my feed is other jumpers, other coaches, other trainers, and I'm always watching, something I put in a long time ago, the hashtags, hashtag high jump, hashtag long jump, hashtag triple jump, hashtag pole vault, right? And so I see stuff all the time, and I'm watching somebody do what you were saying, a hang clean. Didn't look like an incredible amount of weight on 2 feet, like you said.
No.
And you can start off of 1 or you can start with 2, but then the hang with the step forward looks like a long lunge up onto a box, right? Is that what we're talking about? And quick, right? You're trying to do it quick.
Pretty similar.
So yeah, I saw that, and that's one of those ones, like usually what I do when I see something like that I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I just hit save and I go right to my saved, and I've got these incredibly detailed files already of, lifts and speed agility drills and, like stuff for soccer, right? Like fast feet. I call it neuromuscular stimulation, like trying to get really quick. Well, it sounds to me, Dylan, like the super scary thought for people that are listening to this young man and what he's going to do is that he hasn't really done the stuff that he knows is going to get him even farther. If you're already jumping, 755 in the long jump, and you haven't hit a lot of sport specific lifts, I'm kind of scared to what's going to happen when you do, I need to do a little bit of, need to do a little bit of research here and find out about those marks for the trials. But I know your coach Lauren has qualified for those in her past in the high jump, and so 755 is 24.9. Yeah, you start getting out there into the 25s and 26s. I have you start talking about competition bringing out great jumps. When I was a sophomore, I think I was a sophomore at UCLA, we went up to Oregon for our big dual meet, and they had ended a 2-year winning streak by us the previous year. And we go up there and we're kind of fired up for it. We're going up there, but it was cold again, typical Oregon weather. We're up there in March, I think, and gunmetal gray skies and all that. And it was just like that on Saturday. So we get out there, and at one point, I remember we were sweeping the long jump, and they went
Mhm.
three jumps in a row. One guy goes 25-3, next guy goes 25-5, and the next guy goes 25-7 or something like that. And they go from us sweeping to them sweeping. It was like, and all of a sudden, everything started to churn. It was like, but it was going to be close. They had a guy named Joaquin Cruz who was the ended up winning the Olympic gold medal in the 800. So he ran the 4,
Wow.
8. He won the 4, the 8, and anchored their 4x4, which destroyed us. So that was a long day. Once it got rolling again, it's like, golly, these guys. We'd go up there and they'd have their weather and they'd stomp us. And then my junior year, we went up there finally, and it was cold and gray and all that. And then the next day when we woke up, for some weird reason, it was 85 degrees. The sun was out, skies were clear. You could see all of our guys were like, cool. It was like Southern Cal weather. I mean, it was really warm. And they looked like they were kind of like we're not used to it this hot. And it was like we ended up scoring 100 points on them in the dual meet, and they haven't invited us back, I'm proud to say, since that time. But I do remember getting swept in the long jump, which was, and I don't remember any of the names, but it was pivotal. So what is it? Let's talk about that a little bit. I find this interesting. I don't know if you had a great dual meet history when you're in high school, because some conferences aren't really into dual meets anymore. Some of them still do them. I for one kind of miss the old traditional dual meet where it's you against the other school. It used to be back in my day. I say how old I was, and back when I was in high school, it was R3 against R3, and it seems like everything's changed now. Is there anything similar like that you had in high school? Do you guys have someone you hated that you'd go against every year?
I'd say for us, our rival has always been Woodbridge, which is a nearby high school. And there was just something about the athletes on that team that we did not like. But for the most part, we beat them. There was only one school that we couldn't normally beat, which was University High School.
Right.
But for the year we'd have, I think every single meet would be a dual meet until league finals or conference finals, whatever we called it in high school,
Right.
where we'd have obviously every single school. But my senior year of that league finals, we ended up winning 4x1 because we just had some really good, sprinters on that team. And that wasn't normal for us to win like really anything.
Right.
We usually got second place in most events. And so it was really good to go and win that 4x1. And my teammate who was the second leg on that 4x1 goes to Mount Sac now, running the 100 and the 200.
Yeah.
And yeah, other than that, in high school, the dual meets, I really wasn't super into track in high school. I'll admit, I really was just in it for the fun and to stay in shape for soccer. Even though now that I'm looking back at it,
Okay.
it probably wasn't helpful in any way, but it was fun.
Right.
But going back and forth from sport to sport was definitely interesting because I thought they would help one another. But now that I'm in college and you're dedicating 4 hours a day or 3 hours a day to track,
Yeah.
it's like the body type is completely different and the muscles and the stability is completely different. And yeah, I mean, there's not much more to say on that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that everything has changed, the way the landscape runs, because I know, I've been at Vanguard University for the last 2 years, and there are no dual meets. It's all just qualification meets. You go to a meet
Really?
and you're looking for a mark, and if you qualify for indoor nationals, then you go to indoor nationals. And the funny thing
Yeah.
about indoor nationals is that all the meets that you qualify for indoor nationals are all outdoor meets out here, which is I think is kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
It's part of living in Southern California, right? Because we don't really need indoor training facilities because the weather's so nice all the time. When it does happen to rain, I always tell the kids, I'm like, hey, all weather track means all weather track. Yeah, we're going jumping anyway. So yeah, indoor qualifiers, national qualifiers, outdoors, all these big meets. I brought up something else you mentioned, the Brian Clay meet. That same weekend is the Mount Sac Invitational, which is
Yeah.
a premier turning into
The crazy jumper.
yeah. Were you were you were thinking about possibly going, you mentioned the last chance meet, but then you said you were sick that weekend. So being sick was bad timing for the Mount Sac, which was a big show. Last year they had a really big, opening because the track has been completely redone. Have you been up there? Have you seen it since it's been redone?
I haven't. No, I've seen photos and some videos from my buddies, but I've not actually been there.
It's pretty amazing. They dumped at least 25 million into it, I think. So the stadium and everything is redone. My brain being old enough, I can see the old stadium in my mind, from the times that I jumped there. And then the way it is now, it's like not just a facelift. It's like a complete remodel where you're just like, wow, it's really, really nice. There's Nike money running through there. And the rumors that I've heard is that they'd really like to move the Olympic trials from Eugene down to Mount Sac for the 2028 games.
That would be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yep.
Local, right? Close by. Great training facilities if people want to train there. I don't know how that works at this point if you're not going there, but I'm sure that they would open up their doors to both local and international competitors the way Jeremy does down at the Olympic Training Center down there in Chula Vista, like that meet that you jumped at. Big time meets there, and a big show. So now you've got how long until this next big meet that you're going to compete at, Dylan? The regionals?
The last chance meet.
Mm-hmm.
The last chance meet at Azusa would be on the 14th and 15th, I think, of May.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks
well, we have 2 weeks till then. And then 2 weeks after would be outdoor nationals in Pueblo.
Okay. Yeah, that's still a long time. It's kind of stretched out. I remember things happening a little bit more bunched together. It seemed, I can't remember, but whenever we finished Pac-10s, and it was like it might have been a week or two, I guess, between then and NC2As. It all seemed kind of fast when you're in it. But so what are the goals for what's coming up? You said you don't know whether you're going to defend, go to Azusa and jump there. I know it's kind of hard. I picture you standing there all dressed up, ready to go, and then keep looking at the marks like, do I need to take a jump or can I chill?
Do I need to?
Kind of like those.
If I do go, they're still looking at, well, I think I'm still going to go either way for the 4x1 because we want to see how far we can push that. Mm-hmm. We did have our first leg kind of yank his hamstring yesterday. So we have to fill in an alternate there, but we do have some pretty fast sprinters on the team. So we're just looking to, we broke the school record earlier this year with a 41.63, mm-hmm. but that's not at all representative of how fast I think we can go. There's just been little things going on every single time we run it that have kind of been detrimental. But I'm super excited for that team. And I think we're going to run it again on at the last chance meet. As for long jump, after this weekend, I don't think any other school is going to have another meet for another 2 weeks until their last chance meets.
Right.
And, 6 people are going to have to jump better than 7:55 to bump me out, which I'd hope is unlikely. But you never know, especially with this year, everyone's jumping like crazy. Like the past years have not at all been like this in long jump.
Yeah.
And we'll just have to keep an eye on it, see who's jumping well. They might have me go and do exactly what you said and hang out and see if anybody's jumping like crazy.
Yeah.
The guys that I jumped against on Friday, I think there's 3 of us total that are in that top 16 right now. So I'll be going with a guy from Azusa and a guy from RU. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those schools are just crazy with their jumps and their sprints. And then as for nationals, I'm placed, I'll be going in 10th unless somebody jumps further. But I think I can definitely push myself further. I mean, I've only gotten better from here. And I think I'm still in the surface of what I can do. And so whether or not I do jump at that last chance meet, I'll be working on more long jump specific stuff. I'll be staying on campus over summer for the next month until we actually go to nationals. And I think there's a lot I can do stability wise because, my knee's bugging me a little bit. My hamstring's bugging me. And if I don't feel those and I'm feeling 100%, I think I can push it even further, because right now I'm still feeling little aches and pains in my
Sure.
left leg, which is my takeoff leg. And long jump is just one of those events where you have to be giving 100% the whole time. Like that run up, maybe it's
Yeah.
not 100% for you, but I'm definitely pushing it on that run up. And then, when you take off, you're giving 100% of what's in that leg into that jump. And if you're not stable, then you're not gonna be able to take off well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm doing a lot with lifting this year, and what Coach Magneson has been talking to me about is just stability. Like building your muscles is important, but it's not as important as being able to support the forces and the stresses that you're putting onto your muscles and your tendons and your bones. And so over the next month, I'll definitely be working on that and see how far we can go before I end up heading to Pueblo, and see, if I can upset some people,
Right.
make 5 top 3. Who knows? Everyone has to show up that day. That's what I
Yeah.
learned on Friday. I had so many guys who were jumping well, and everyone just has to show up and jump that day. And so, anything could happen in long jump, especially. So I'm excited for Pueblo if I do
Yo,
end
you
up going.
like you're saying when you see the a 7.85, right? You're thinking, oh wow, that's kind of like way, way out there, right? But that doesn't mean that person's gonna jump that particular day. Everybody's got their day, like you said, when you catch the
Yeah.
board just right, you do all those things. I was curious what you're talking about from the joint stability standpoint. I mean, talk with this with my jumpers all the time, long triple high, that, the power versus speed paradigm. Because everybody, you say, are you a power jumper or
Mhm.
you a speed jumper? I'm like, okay, well, first of all, I understand that it's kind of a thing in our heads. If you're going slower, easier to control your speed, you drop down
Yep.
low and you power up and you get lift, right? So we're talking high jump here, but a little bit long and triple both. When people get in trouble, to me, is when I hear that just wham on the board, that super
Yeah.
hard stomp, right? And I'm like, I always think, I'm like, man, when you hit that board, it should be like a da 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 dunk, just like a little quick tap, like get on and off the board
Mhm.
as quickly as you can. I'm trying to preach like kung fu, like you're going to be the Shaolin priest, that walks through walls and look for, you can't be seen, and like listen for,
Yeah.
I can't hear you, like I want you to run off that board like, Legolas the elf in the snow, like not even
Yeah,
leave
exactly.
footprints, like, because when you hit that board, man, you can almost feel force waves and like heat emanating from where that hit
Yeah.
on the takeoff. So that long, powerful last step, like you're talking about, long and low, totally undesirable, right? You put a huge shock wave through your leg, goes all the way up into your hip, your knee, your low back, right? You're like, and you don't get anything out of it,
No,
right?
seriously.
The worst jumps ever,
Dude, my
right?
low back and my abs were
Right.
killing me after that jump. When I jumped 749, I was like, ooh, like my lower back, I was like, shoot, what just happened there?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, goes right
Yeah.
through, right? Like those shockwaves. So it's interesting. Joint stability becoming even more important than strength and power. So that collapse is something that
Seriously.
you're talking about. I've seen that a lot. That long step and then boom, and it drops. So if you can go with a long step, but you have the speed and the power to withstand it, is that desirable, or do you want that step to be shorter?
I mean, I think you definitely want that step to be shorter. For me, I'm more of a speed jumper, I would say. I don't think I have a crazy amount of height, but I mean, the best long jumpers, their hips are only dipping at the board a quarter to a half inch.
Right.
So it's not any crazy adjustment. And I was actually talking to Mike Powell yesterday during the triple jump. He's the coach at Azusa.
Yes.
And so, and obviously the world record holder. So I was
Right.
chilling with him talking, and I asked him about it, and he said that the biggest kind of power generator isn't going to be that takeoff leg. It's going to be for me, my left arm, my right leg, the one that are driving upwards is what's going to translate that horizontal momentum to vertical momentum.
Yes.
Your like left leg, your takeoff leg is only going to do so much, especially when you're going that fast. You can only produce so much vertical power from it. So you
Yeah.
really need your off leg and drive arm to really just drive into the air.
Yeah.
And something else I heard from my pal is that all these jumpers nowadays are afraid of going fast. And I think that's something that I'm kind of embracing. I'm pushing my speed, but maybe I'm suffering a little bit in the height department and not jumping as high. But
Mhm.
my biggest strength is speed. And I'm going to use it if I can. And all the
Yeah.
other guys in my conference, there's only maybe one or two other guys that I jumped against on Friday who really do utilize their speed, but they also have some vertical pop.
Yeah.
The guy who got second place, his name is Yakuba. He goes to Art U, and he's from Paris. I talked to him a little bit, but he's super good in the triple jump, and he's super good at utilizing his speed and taking that speed through the board.
Mhm.
And for us on Friday, it was just a battle. But other than him, I wouldn't say there's anyone else that really, really uses their speed super well, through that takeoff board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you say that because coming from the high jump department for the most part, I got introduced to triple jump through my coach, Baru Elias, when I was, working with him. He was at Long Beach City, and he did a lot of triple jump stuff with us, even as high jump and long jump. But he was excellent, excellent coach at all three. But I was taught early about how to get air. So one of the things that I try to do with my long jumpers is that exactly what you said for left-footed takeoff is get that left hand, above. I see so many people
Yep.
when the left arm comes up, it looks like a short running jab, or even lower than
Yep.
that, like they're punching somebody in the stomach. And I'm like, what are you doing? Get that arm up, you got to transfer some lift up off the board
Yep.
and fire that other arm back. And then obviously your drive knee, a little bit different than high jump. You can't lean back and stop and go up. So you still want to get some up, but you still want some forward,
Yep.
right? So that angle, what's that angle like for you guys? What are you guys preaching? Is it a 45? What is it that you're working at on the knee drive?
For long jump, the optimal takeoff would be around 22 degrees because 45 degrees is optimal from a standstill, like
Right.
physics wise, because if you're just sitting there and you chuck something, 45 degrees is going to carry it as far as you can.
Right.
But when you
Mathematically, yeah.
bring, speed into that, when you bring speed into that, the physics equation completely changes. And 22 or 23 degrees, somewhere around there,
Mm-hmm.
it would be the optimal takeoff. And, it's different for everybody. If someone's really, really fast, maybe that degree could be a little bit lower. But if someone can, keep that speed and push a higher angle, that might be beneficial.
Right.
But it's definitely a sweet spot around 20, 22 degrees. And the biggest part of it is not dipping your hips too much to try to get that angle.
Right.
I'm not there yet. I'm not at that angle. I'm lower than that. But my speed carries me through the air, so works out.
Do you guys work? I'm curious because, working myself in the same area as you, I haven't had anybody jump that far, but when you're getting into the board, both I tell all the athletes, I go, look, long jump, triple jump, high jump, there's also an element of lean back. You've got to lean back a little, right? Because if you're too far forward, you're gonna put all your weight on the wrong side, and you're in danger doing a front flip, right? So, what is there an angle that you're looking at for that also, along with the knee drive angle? This is just curious. I'm just curious to hear if you talk about it.
Not specifically. I mean, with the knee drive angle, maybe, getting that knee up to 90 and not dropping it too fast. I don't think the angle matters as much as how long you hold it off that board. Because if you're just bringing it up and dropping it immediately, you're not holding that momentum in the air.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough too. The other thing that Elias taught me, other than how to get lift, was cycle. Like cycling was the preeminent thing with him. And if you watch some of his athletes from Brian Stanton, who went to the Olympics, and I think it was '88 in Seoul, he had this for a guy that was 6'5", and he just had these unbelievable legs. But he used to just have this high cycling where you would go, oh, knees look like they were above hip high, right? Feet kicking him in the glutes every time, high perfect arms. You're just watching him going, God, I hate that guy. His running was so pristine. It was so perfect, right?
Yeah.
You see the cycling, and cycling is huge because as you're coming through the board, like if you see a drop in cycling, right? If that heel doesn't come up to the butt, for instance, all the way through, both after the takeoff and also the drive leg, both sides.
Yep.
You see them start to slow down or to drop. It's got to be a decrease in acceleration right before the board. You can't. And in general, what is somebody trying to do when they decrease their acceleration? They're trying to power. They're going to try to drive that leg, and it's like, the funny thing is the faster that leg's moving, like you're talking about, the faster that drive leg's going to be. You might not be thinking, I've got to drive this leg up, but it's already moving through there because you're flying so fast, right?
Yeah.
So, oh man, okay. The question that I had for you, you're talking about the 4x1. My first question was, which leg are you running? And the second question I have is, how fast is your 100 meters? Do you run the open 100 on relay?
The funny story. In high school, I think I ran the 100 once, maybe twice. The most recent time was like sophomore year, and I was not fast. I probably ran high 11s, like 11.7 sophomore year of high school, which wasn't fast for my league, and it wasn't fast in general. I was more of a jumper in high school. And I had speed that I would utilize in soccer, but it wasn't translating to the track because it's completely different.
Right.
You're not pivoting at all on the track. So, once I started to get down my linear speed, I ran an open 100 this year. I ran an open 60 as well. In the 60 indoor, I went 7:05, or no, 7:03 at Pitt State. And then the 100 this year, I ran 10:96 in Fullerton. And, that's not crazy fast either.
Right.
I think I could definitely run faster than that, but how that translates to long jump is just, speed through the board, being able to maintain the momentum rather than being extremely fast myself.
Right.
So I do think I am faster than 9.6, but it's my top speed that is my strength and not my start. So if I work on my start, I can bring that a little bit. But as for the 4x1, I'm the anchor leg in there. So my coach wants me to be able to open up and just, get down that back stretch.
Right.
Actually, well, backstretch second leg, but get down that final leg.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting too, because it brings up another question with the long jump. Is the legacy between speed and jumping has obviously been great since Carl. Carl Lewis was one of the best sprinters in the world for years, and nobody ever beat Carl until my boy Mike Powell. Mike Powell and I were teammates for 1 year at UCLA. He transferred from UCI to UCLA, and we got to hang out, and he would come over and high jump every once in a while. And, he would do long triple. He was all over the place. But Carl was obviously a 9.6, or whatever he ran at his peak, and dominated the long jump for years. And then I know that Mike was training with John Smith at UCLA, and he got faster. And I think he may have gotten as low as like a 10.4. I heard rumors that he ran like a 10.4 100 meters. So he was real long legged. So I don't know that he got up to speed that quickly. If you see Mike, he still looks pretty much the same. He might a couple pounds around the midsection, but pretty much the same, real skinny, tall, and fast. So, so what do you think? You're saying 10.96 now? What do you think you can get down to?
Based on my 60 time, just running some calculations, I can go 10.8 probably on a normal day. But I think if I improve my top speed and I learn to carry that speed through the last 40 a lot better, I can probably drop another 0.2 seconds, down to 10.6. But yeah, well, it's all up in the air right now. But I haven't done a crazy amount of, speed training that's specific to carrying my top speed. It's more been about, just maintaining. And my start is not great. It's pretty sad. Like I can get out pretty hard, but I'm not pushing out like any of my teammates, but I end up catching them around the 60-meter mark, and then I'm gone from there. There's one other guy on my team who really does run with me, and his top speed is really good. He ran a 10.62 yesterday in the 100. Oh no, 2 days ago in the 100. And it was a good showing, but I think he could have had a better start as well. And it was really his top speed that carried him through to win
Yeah.
that heat.
So you're talking about getting to top speed and, the difficulty in getting there if you're not starting well. Have you guys considered doing a European rolling start just so you can run into your mark and already be moving and then go from there?
Yeah. So this year, up until January or February, I had never gone past 16 steps in my long jump approach.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wasn't performing super great. And our coach, I talked with Coach Mags, and I was like, hey, I did some research looking at some of the top long jumpers collegiately and professionally. And I didn't see anyone that was taking less than 20 steps. And so I was like, okay, like maybe we can try to see if I can get an 18-step mark and see where that takes me. And actually, the first meet where I broke the school record, where you were there at Concordia, was my first step. I mean, my first 18-step meet
Right.
with that long jump approach. So after that, I was like, oh, shoot, maybe I'm actually just not hitting my top speed and I don't have enough time to compose myself to get myself through the board.
Right.
Because sprinting down the 100-meter runway and sprinting down the long jump runway, it's similar, but I need more time to compose myself when I am at top speed. Because
Right.
I wouldn't say it's like full percent. I say it's like 90, 95%.
Right.
But something I've been working on is opening up. I'm a very like relaxed sprinter. My coach calls me Baywatch. He's like, stop Baywatching right now. Like you're not trying to look good. Come on. Yeah, that's one of my cues. He's like, put your arms up, drive your knees, don't look so pretty.
Right.
And so I've been working on long jump and just like opening my arms up, making sure I'm getting my arms tend to come close to my chest and I'm really opening them up.
Right.
And that translates a lot better into my takeoff. But that meet you were at was my first 18-step meet, and this most recent meet was my first 20-step meet. We were working on it for Brian Clay to go
Right.
20 steps, and obviously I got sick, and so this is my first meet 2 days ago that I did 20 steps, and it felt a lot more natural, and it
Yeah.
felt like I had a lot more time to compose myself for the board because I take off my left, so I'm taking 3 left foots in a drive phase and then 4 to kind of compose myself and get that tempo. And then those last 6, I just drive my legs down and then take off.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I've told this, to the jumpers for years. Number one, I tell them speed kills, and it's in all of the jumps. It's not just the long jump. It's most obvious in the long jump. Triple jump, it's harder for people to see because it's so extended, but it's still, speed dominates. And then the high jumpers at the world level are so fast. I watch guys, Brandon Stark has a long approach like you're talking. He used to have a 16-step long flowing approach, and Barshim does a run in to a 7, but he's hauling. I mean, he's really, really running fast.
Yeah.
And I tell these guys, I go, you don't understand how much that speed translates into lift and how far away from the pit you need to be. But I also say, as fast as they're going, they can't be going full speed because I go, it's really hard to figure out how to get your limbs working when you're going full blast. It's hard to then go, oh, wait, I got to jump, like you're saying. So there's a transition in there where you're like, okay, I'm up to speed now. I picture like the USS Enterprise. Okay, you're at Mach 5, and then it's like, okay, or you're at warp 5, and then you're like, okay, well, let's maintain warp 5. Now get phasers ready. And then okay, I'm locked and loaded.
Yep.
Right, now fire phasers, when you go to take off. So yeah, that's getting that speed. It's interesting to hear you talk through the logistics of it. You have any midway marks, or is it just going from where you start? There's any checkpoints along the way?
Just for my mark for the board. Yeah, there's no points. I would probably have a 6-step point if I was doing a little walk or a jog into it, but I'm going from a standstill, kind of leaning back and then going. But in the past, I have done that little walk or skip run up and then gone into it. And I do like that because it allows me to bring more speed into it.
Right.
I do think there's a fine line there. It's like, you don't want to be going 100% because you're, by the time you hit the board, you're going to not know what's going on.
Right.
And I've heard a bunch of coaches say that you want to hit your top speed right when you get to the board, But I think yes, in a way that's true, but I also think you want to hit it maybe a couple steps before, because preparing for the board is a whole
Right.
nother thing in itself. Because if
Right.
you're just sprinting through the board, you're really not putting your leg down. And there were numerous times at practice where my knee just kind of caved in on me and I got no height, and I just
Yeah.
wasn't ready to jump
Right.
at that 16, unless I was, going slower than I would like to be.
Right.
It's now that I can bring that speed through and I can prepare more for it and get my arms up and get my knees up, it feels way more relaxed. It feels way easier. It feels natural. Like nothing really hurts except for, maybe my lower back when I pushed it
Right.
at 749, 55. But
Yeah.
other than that, it feels super natural. My knee's not bugging me. There's, it's a
Yeah.
totally different game.
Um,
And I'll just that one time.
was was that another thought was coming? I didn't know if I
Oh,
interrupted you. No,
yeah, it's just, yeah, you go for it. You're good.
I was my curiosity was I trained my jumpers or high jumpers especially to count their steps. And for some of them, it's
Mhm.
like a completely foreign concept. If they've been working by themselves, or if
Really?
they have a coach who doesn't tell them to do that, they're like, "Why would I do that?" And I'm like, "Well, I like it because of a cadence, a rhythm, an acceleration rhythm."
Yep.
I'm like, "Hey, if you have an 8-step approach, we need to master like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, nice and smooth." And that pattern right there, I go, might be good for a 4-foot high jump, but that same pattern is going to play out faster and faster. I need that same acceleration all the way through.
Mhm.
So I've had, I was taught to do same in the long jump, but to only count my left leg because that was my takeoff leg. And it's hard to count when you get into the teens
Yep.
really quickly, right? So my question was, are you counting steps at all? And if you are you counting, your takeoff leg all the way through?
I am counting my takeoff leg all the way through. And I think in high school, I don't think I counted my legs at all. Maybe my 8 steps, but it's a lot easier to break the 16 steps into 3 phases. Like for me, it'd be 3 left legs of a drive and then 2 float phase, and then 3 where I'm really bringing my feet down.
Right.
Um, and it really does help with consistency. I haven't hit the board as perfectly as I am ever right now.
Right.
I'm within, when I do scratch, it's a millimeter, a centimeter, like it's super duper close. And then when I do hit the board, I'm a millimeter, centimeter behind that line. So
Getting the
it
max out
really,
of the
really
board.
helps with consistency. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And you'll be jumping so much farther if you are hitting that board right on.
sure.
And I think a lot of athletes are just, it's really hard to keep 16 steps consistent, but it's a lot easier to keep, 6 steps consistent, and then 4 steps, and then 6 steps consistent, and breaking it out like that in your head.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, I like that. All right. Well, hey, Dylan, I appreciate you getting up so early on a Sunday to share your thoughts
Of
and
course.
your aspirations and dreams. And I'm looking forward to seeing you go. I don't know if I need to make it to that last chance meet because there's always a lot of great athletes there like yourself. Um, if nothing else, just to see you run and to get a chance to talk with your coach, because Lauren and I get along great, and we got to get her back on here. I know she's been like as busy as a one-armed paper hanger, but we got we got to get her back on
She has.
the podcast. Oh my gosh, I've never seen anybody do so many things at one time. I keep thinking
It's ridiculous.
I would be a babbling insane person by now. Um, I've been as busy as I've
Yep.
been in a long time, and I'm barely able to put a sentence together. So I know she's doing a great job. We'll have to do another one, just talk about her. But hey, good
Mhm.
luck, and I hope I'm going to do a little research. I'll send you some numbers on the old Olympic standard if you're going to be. I think you've got over a year, right? So that's like you said, it's I just mentioned this in passing. Like I was kind of in the same boat. It's interesting to hear you talk about that because my sophomore year at UCLA, I had a terrible first year, and I was a walk on. So even though I'd won CIF and I won the Masters meet, I went up to state, and I was kind of on a roll. And I'm thinking, man, I should be able to go anywhere I want. Well, UCLA had a 7-7 jumper at the time and an all-time great named Del Davis, who came in second in NC2As one year, and then Lee Balkin, who was a legend here in California, jumped 7-3 in high school, still holds the state meet high school record for 7-3 in the finals. He was there, right? So when I got there, they were like, we don't need you. You're welcome to come up, but we don't really need you here. I was like number 7 on the depth chart. So I remember asking Bob Larson, who was named the high jump coach, and he shook my hand the first day and said, I don't know anything about the high jump. So I was like, okay, wait. You have these great jumpers, but that's a whole nother story. But I did remember asking him, saying, well, we'd like to have you walk on. And my brain was like, wait, I thought we were talking scholarship. So I said, well, what does it take to get a scholarship here? And he said, you jump 7-2 and we'll talk. So I was like, okay. So my freshman year was terrible, okay. 6'8", right? And then that sophomore year, when I got a lot stronger, I jumped 7 feet for the first time. A couple weeks later, I jumped 7'2" for the first time, and was like, oh. And then somebody told me in the middle of that, kind of like the way I mentioned to you, they're like, the Olympic qualifying height's 7'4" and a quarter or something. I think it was 225, and I had jumped 220. So I was like, oh, I didn't even know that. I was taking jumps at the qualifying height, once I made 7'2", didn't even know it, right? So I went to some of those last chance qualifiers, because this is 1984. That happened to be my sophomore year, was 84. My whole brain set was not on going to the trials that year or anything else. My mindset was, when I got 7'2", that next Monday I was sitting in Bob Larson's office and he was like, he sees me and he goes, oh, you want to talk scholarship? I'm like, yeah, that's what you said. And he goes, okay, let's get you hooked up, but I didn't have Olympics or Olympic trials in my brain at the start of that season at all. It just kind of, as your performances go up, all of a sudden somebody goes, hey, you're nudging into higher areas here where you could, start thinking about going to these really big meets, right? Every step up is a step up, right? So you're going to the regionals, you're going, you go from there. There's, a lot of college guys will make it through that to go to national championships, right? And then it just depends on the year. So, but anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. And I'll be that guy that's putting unwanted pressure on you. Like,
go,
Dylan, go.
That wasn't on my radar. Yeah, that wasn't even on my radar. And like, now that I'm thinking about it, I have another reason to push and, improve these next couple months, especially, and then, moving into the later half of the year and then early next year. And I think those Olympic trials are going to be coming up soon, huh?
Right. Yeah, they come up pretty fast. So, well, it's going to be exciting to watch that meteoric rise that you're on. Let's keep you healthy and keep listening to Coach Lauren, because she knows what she's doing. And we're wishing the best for you, Dylan. I'm looking forward to bumping into you again and seeing you compete. And again, thanks so much for spending your time with us this morning here on Raise the Bar. And best of luck coming up. Can't wait to see you jump over 8 meters. That's got to be soon.
One day.
All right, sir. All right.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Right. Thanks, man. You too.
Bye.
Bye. So that was Dylan Fox, who is a sophomore at Concordia University here in Southern California at Irvine. He's jumped 755. I have to look these things up because I'm a dinosaur and I don't know my metrics at all. But he's jumped 24.9 this year, which has him currently placed 10th out of the top 16, which get to go to the nationals. So like you said, you heard him say he's trying to hold on to his spot, and he may have to defend it a little bit at the all-comers meet, the last chance at Azusa Pacific out here. I'm sure they have them everywhere, like you said, from all around, the nation. So, but he's got those things coming up in a 4x1 relay, and just sounds like he just keeps getting better. I'd have to look up those other marks from earlier this year, but I know getting out to 24 and a half, 25, is rarefied air. So, and that's going to finish us up here on Raise the Bar. Thanks for spending your time, and remember to keep raising that bar in your training, in your nutrition, in your sports psychology, anything and everything to help improve that performance. And here we're just talking about stuff because I'm old and I can't do it anymore, but try to impart my wisdom or learn something even at this stage. So until next time, Troy Haynes, Raise the Bar, signing off. We'll talk soon.